5 scores! Rick Bud.
We've decided to get ourselves back in the game again with our podcast.
Rick Bud and Gary Madden.
Probably the craziest story that you're ever going to hear about hockey.
We're going to be coming back to you on a regular basis.
You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Welcome, everyone, to the Squid and Ultimate Leafs Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs Fan. Thanks for joining us for episode 70, part 2 of the Tiger Williams interview. If you enjoyed episode 69, part 1, you're going to love this one. Stay tuned and have a listen.
No.
Now you touched on your relationship with Ballard as a good one. A couple things here. Now, you're one of the few guys that really could speak to him, but there was a time when you and Harold apparently had an argument over something, and he made a comment to you that, well, you're just a stubble jumper from Saskatchewan, and you replied right back to him that, well, it's better than being a fat old bastard from Ontario.
Well, Mr. Ballard would challenge different players to see what they were made of. And if you did not stand up to him, he didn't want you. He didn't respect you, and he didn't want you. So what you had to put your balls on the line with him. And when I called him a fat bastard, and I stood up and said it right to his face, he liked that. That's when we became buddies, right there and then. Because he knew I wasn't going to put up, yeah, he's the owner, yeah, he could trade me, but you're not going to disrespect me in front of my teammates. I don't care who you are. Because you know what? There's lots of other teams I can go play for. But I want to stay in this organization. I wish I was still there to this day. I loved it there every second of my whole career. I loved playing in Toronto. I loved the fans. I loved everything about the whole thing. And but if you're going to call me out, even if you're the guy signing the checks, you're calling out the wrong guy because I'm going to react. Because I have to show that strength to my teammate that I can't pick and choose.
Now, is that why you gave him the bear? Hey, now, Tiger, is that why you gave him the bear rug as a gift?
I gave him the bear rug at the end of that year just to kind of make him feel a little bit. And he loved it, and I wanted to do it for him. And I just liked him. Old Popsy was the guy who used to deliver the popcorn and the ice cream and the Maple Leaf guys. I flew out from Vancouver to his funeral. Guess how many people were there?
You?
Popsy and me. Yeah. And I paid for the funeral. So some of those people were awesome.
Now let me ask you this. Did you ever cut the $100 from King and Ballard that owed you from the Grey Cup?
Oh yeah. We used to have well, that Hamilton Tiger Cat thing when he put those on the boards and then the league didn't want him to, and I said, well, he put them on for me and all that. I mean, you know what? Mr. Ballard was a good guy. I liked him. Some of my teammates didn't, but that's their problem. They should have went and talked to him about it, and challenged him. I challenged him all the time.
Yeah, he wasn't a bad guy. He was just cheap. I mean, but I remember something similar to what you went through with him. We're getting on the plane in the charter one night, and Harold's behind Gary Lehman, who's right behind me. And someone had said something, or I think Gary said something to me about, it was right near the end of the season and my contract was up. And Ballard said, he goes, he won't get another goddamn dime out of me. And I just turned right around and I just stared right through him with my eyes. And I didn't move. I just stood on the step of the plane and I didn't move. And then just turned around, got on the plane, never said anything, just stared at him. And I think I could have burned a hole through him with my eyes when I did that. So, but he gave me the contract I wanted. So I didn't, I didn't mind the guy except for the fact that he was sometimes cheap and sometimes he said things in the paper that some guys couldn't handle. Didn't bother me, but bothered a lot of other guys.
Well, I think Mr. Ballard's attitude was he wanted to, no matter what it was, for whatever reason, he wanted the Toronto Maple Leafs on the front of the the Toronto
Yep.
Star or the Globe and Mail every single day. He didn't want to
Every day.
share that space when the Blue Jays come along or the Argonauts were around or whatever else.
Yeah.
He wanted to be on that front page, and he would do whatever he had to do that. Well, to me, that's just a guy that's he's a smart man. He's a good businessman. And the only thing that was sad about the only thing that I can complain against about playing for the Leafs were in our day, we didn't get any stock options. That was not right. We should have got stock options or had the opportunity to buy shares. Trying to buy Toronto Maple Leaf shares when I played there, I'd go on the bid. You'd be on the bid for a month and might get 5 shares because, I don't know if I don't think any of the other guys even thought about it, but, I ended up having a few thousand shares when Mr. Ballard got bought out and life moved on. But it would have been nice as players to own that stock. Because that stock, I'm buying it between $6 and $12. When he died, it was $170. That was a good investment.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I got a funny story about that because my contract when we were negotiating, Harold wanted to give me 5,000 shares of Maple Leafs stock, and I'm like, no, I don't want stock. Of course, I don't know anything about stocks. I wish I had known Mike at that time because he would have said, yeah, grab them.
Make it.
Because I think they were like $20-some, and then they went to 250 and split 5 to 1 or something. And so if I had got those, I just wish I had known because I didn't know anything. It was like, no, I want the money.
Oh,
I would have rather had. He could keep the money. Give me the stock.
Stock.
Well, I didn't know. I didn't know anything about it. So
I get it.
Now, Doug, you touched on your relationship with Jim Gregory, great man. Anything else you can add about him, your relationship with him?
I know. I really respected the man. I thought he was good. I thought he was very fair to everybody. The one thing about what he did, well, that whole organization did when I was there, was everything was first class. They never nickel and dimed anybody. And, we stayed at the best places. We chartered all the time. They made it as best as possible for us. And after going to so you don't know any better because you have only been at one team. But once you get traded around the league, you find out that not every team, not every owner really cares about winning, in my opinion. But Mr. Gregory was always fair. I liked him. I liked him a lot. He was definitely the best GM I had. Not that, and I had some good GMs since then, but he was fair to everybody, and he was always first class. And as a player, I appreciated that.
Well, let's talk about the guy who replaced him. Punch Imlach comes in. Things turn around, but not the right way. They start to go bad.
And I apologize to the Leaf Nation. I should have cut that guy's throat the second night I met him. And I didn't do it. And then it is what it is. But that was my fault. And I apologize to all the Leaf Nation for not cutting his throat right off the bat because he was the game had passed him by so long ago. Mm-hmm. His attitude, he had no class. He was just a bad person. And that, again, in all fairness, to Mr. Ballard, when you're at his age, it's probably easy to manipulate a fellow like that. And Punch was a pretty good manipulator, but he had no class. He's a worse guy. Yes, he won the 67 Cup and good for him, but his time was over, and it was a very, very poor decision by that organization to bring him back. And they set that organization back for a while. The only good news about Imlach in my life is that he made me a lot of money when I got traded. Because I got paid 4 times more than I did when I was playing there.
Well, what were the players thinking when as an example, we'll get into the trade in a second. Obviously, we're going with this, but some of the bizarre decisions, like bringing Carl Brewer back. I mean, that must have divided the room immensely, figuring that everything was going right back to Imlach.
Well, the problem with Carl had is I think the older guy thought he was there for being a spy, which is not a good atmosphere for in a dressing room. I like Carl. I spent my time to get to meet Carl. Carl was still a phenomenal skater. Carl was. He could skate all day long. Carl was not a stupid man by any means, and but Carl probably needed the dough at the time, and blah 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 blah. But it is what it is. It was a poor decision by Imlach. It didn't serve them right. I remember the time when we were like, if you ever raced, nobody could beat Carl Brewer around the rink. Nobody, not even Solomon could beat him. I mean, he was unbelievable. But
was it more about the optics of it all that was the worst part about it?
Well, I think it was
like you say, like everybody thought he was a spy.
Yeah, and the other thing, Carl, the game at Carl, I mean, Carl could still skate, but Carl certainly didn't want to go in the corner. And it wasn't when we were doing a drill, we're skating around the rink. I don't know, guys had to do 6 laps or whatever it was, and Carl's going a million miles an hour. And he goes to pass Ian Turnbull, and Turnbull sees it coming. He pulls the net. Yeah, Carl's not paying attention. He runs right into the net, blood everywhere. I'm on the forwards, the D are doing it. I'm on the bench. I go to jump over the boards. Dan Maloney grabs me and he goes, "You let the bastard bleed to death. You go out there, I'll kill you." I said, "Stop, she's my teammate." And I go out there. But, I mean, those are things that happen that are a bit of a blemish on the organization, but we've all got over them. And but as a person, I had no problem with Carl personally, but I took the time to go and talk to him and meet him. But it was just another thing that Imlach was just jerking us all around. That's what that was about.
Well, let's get into the root of the whole story here. February 18th, 1980, changes both your lives. You get the call, you're on the move. Walk us through that whole event in that day.
Well, it was very, very strange and not very respectful, but we played in New York and we won the game that night. We went over to Long Island. Some of the guys would stay in New York and do whatever they were doing. I went back on the bus over to Long Island, and my roommate, who I got traded with, was the first time we ever roomed together. So that was strange too, with Jerry Butler. And so it wasn't until, I don't know, 1 a.m. or so, whatever it was, I got up to go take a squirt, and there was an envelope, had been slidden under the door, and I opened it up, of course, and it said, "You and your roommate have got traded." Never said where. Be in the lobby at 7:00. Well, Butsy wasn't even there. He wasn't even home yet. So now I'm thinking, okay, well, nobody had signed it, and it was on hotel paper. So I'm thinking, is that one of Sittler's and Lanny's jokes they used to do? Like what the hell's going on here? So Butsy comes home. I don't know what time it was. His wife probably doesn't want to hear that now. And so I show him the letter, and he goes, "Well," he says, "those guys are dicking with us." And I says, "Yeah, I don't know." So anyway, I said, "Well, I'm going to find out right there and then." Now he's there. So I throw on my sweatpants, and I don't even have a shirt on. I go up to the suites where Punch is, and I'm banging on the door. They won't open the door. They said, "We're not opening the door." And I said, "Open the door, I'll kick the door down." Well, all of a sudden, the security comes. So I got no shoes on, a pair of sweatpants, no shirt. The security threw me out of the hotel. I'm outside. And I'm trying to get in the door, and I'm wrestling with the doorman. And I said to him, "Listen, I'm staying here. You guys don't want to get hurt. I'm going back up to my room. I got to get dressed if I can't stay here." So anyway, I go back up to the room. They never bothered me. We went back in the room. When we got down in the lobby in the morning, we still did not, to this day, nobody's ever told Jerry Butler he got traded. Or me. To this day. And we're flying. We fly back to New York to Toronto. We jump on the plane in Toronto. We're heading out to Vancouver. And Butsy looks at me and goes, "I hope you're not bullshitting me." Okay, so away we went. That's how it happened.
Squid, your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ours was a little bit better in that they did tell us, and Harry Neal came to our apartment. Well, actually, it was funny because when I got drafted and went to Vancouver, Lupul and I were rooming together, and but we couldn't get an apartment. There was no apartments available in Vancouver. So I stayed with Glenn Hanlon, and then in February, we got an apartment finally, and it was in a building right beside Harry Neal's. So anyway, about 6:30 in the morning, I think it was, because of the time change and everything, he wanted us to find out from him before everything broke out in Toronto. So he's buzzing on and we had a little party the night before because we moved into our apartment, and my phone starts ringing, and I'm what the heck's going on? Like, our phone isn't even hooked up. So I pick it up anyway, and it says, "Hey, Rick, it's Harry. Let me in." And I'm thinking, yeah, okay. The guys are screwing with us. Second time, he calls me, and then I realize it's him again. And I press what I think is the button to open the door. And then I obviously press the wrong button. Third time he calls, he goes, "Never mind, just come down to the front." So I walk down, and he says, "We traded you and Billy Derlego to Toronto." He says, "You got a 11 or 12 o'clock flight," or whatever it was. Be on it. And that was it. That was it.
Well, what else are they going to tell you? But it's too bad you got traded.
Yeah, I mean, and then I played my first game in Long Island, where you guys were going to be playing the next night after the Rangers, or 2 nights after the Rangers, I think it was. And so we played there, and then I think we were on the road for a couple of games after that, and then we finally came back home. But for me, it was a good move because, Harry, I wasn't playing. I was sitting in the press box by that time. And part of that was on me, obviously. But, Harry kind of took a disliking to me right from the beginning. And not personally, just, as far as a hockey player. So, it happens. And like I said, a lot of it has to be on me because I didn't perform probably as good as I could have and as good as Harry wanted me to. So,
now, Tiger, what did you know about the 2 kids you got traded for?
Well, I mean, I was a kid when I was a kid. I had every hockey card in the world, and I followed the game religiously, and I did when I played, so I knew all about Squids Jr. I knew everything about Billy D because he played in Brandon and blah, 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 blah. And also I'd played against them. Yeah. And, sometimes when you're younger, you go through it's good to go when you're young to go through a little bit of a hard time, whether I never got the opportunity and I didn't want it to sit out a game. The only games I sat out was some referee would make a bad judgment and I'd get suspended. And I should never got suspended over bad judgment. But anyway, or poor eyesight, or the combination of both. But anyway, so I knew their level, their talent level, and nobody could shoot the puck better than Squid. Nobody could handle the puck better than Billy D. And they could skate. So they were, like I said in the beginning, it would have been great if they would have stayed in Vancouver and somebody else would have went. And I would have had got to play on the left side because we would have been a hell of a line.
Now,
But
Squid, let me ask
it
you.
is what it is.
Let me ask you, Squid, the pressure on both of you guys replaced one of the most popular Maple Leafs of all time, or did you guys even have any idea? And maybe the second part of this question is, if not for the grace of God, maybe an election that day, your reception or your landing in Toronto might have been a little different.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, we get on the plane and Billy goes, "Hey, let's have a couple of beers," because we were flying to Toronto, staying overnight, and then going to Long Island the next day. And the captain comes on the speaker and he says, "Well, today's election day, ladies and gentlemen, and we will not be serving any alcohol on the flight." Well, I swear, Billy, I think he offered $1,000 to the flight attendant. I said, "Billy, we don't need a beer that badly. Like, I mean, we gotta go to Toronto, then we gotta go to Long Island tomorrow. We're probably going to be some press at the airport." And sure enough, we didn't get a drink. And when we got there, every TV station, newspaper were waiting for us at the airport. So it was probably a good thing that it was election day. Otherwise, our arrival might have been a little bit different.
Well, that's the other thing, Squid. If I would have played with both you and Billy, the beer days would have been over, or you would have been getting funked.
Well, we're going to get into that in a second here. Now, Tiger, Squid and Billy both start putting up some good numbers, but you yourself had your biggest year, 35 goals, 62 points, second most penalty minutes you had in your career, 343. You just said, but you must have been keeping an eye on these guys a little more of their progress going forward.
Well, good players are good players. And sometimes when teams put good players in the right situation, they excel. And and maybe in Vancouver they were not put in the best situations. I don't know. When I played against them, they were good, but they were young. And sometimes when you're young, it takes you a little bit while to figure it out. And it's just the whole lifestyle. It's a big change. When you a lot of kids even playing junior today, they think they're in shape. Then there's pro shape, and it's a whole different level. It's like hitting off the black tees or off the ladies' tees. Good luck, And
you're right. You know what? I gotta. You know what? I'm gonna jump in, Tiger, because I totally agree with you. And my son went a different route, and he went to the U.S. development program because he was a dual citizen, and he went to university. And I got to tell you, that was a big, big thing for him because his senior year, he had extra time. So he took a cooking course for a whole semester and a bunch of other different courses. So when he turned pro, he was able to live on his own easily because he could cook. He could, cook good meals for himself. And, he wasn't going out eating junk food every day. But we didn't have that luxury when we came into the National League because we played junior, and I didn't learn how to cook.
That's good. Were you following Tiger's progress from Toronto? Just curiously, I mean, everybody wants to know when they got traded from another guy how the trade is working out, and usually the best way is by the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, I knew he was going to thrive there or anywhere he went. I mean, it was just he had the mindset that he was going to go in and he was going to do his job. And no one was going to stop him. And I respected that, as I did with all the guys in the league that played that way. So I wasn't surprised that he did very well in Vancouver. And then obviously he had a few more stops after that. But, it didn't surprise me one bit.
Now,
Not
Tiger,
one bit.
Let's talk about your first game back in Toronto. Talk about how anxious you were getting back to play your first game. I was at that game, by the way. I sat behind the visitors' bench, that first row. Somehow we got those seats, and I ended up there from work. You scored, chosen as a star. I was going to leave, but they wouldn't let you out because, because you beat us, Toronto team. So you can't get out because you're blocking there with all the ushers. You can't get out of those seats. So I had to stand there. But Kevin McCarthy and a few of the guys stayed on the bench. And I remember I heard McCarthy say, watch this. You're announced as a star. So you come down the ice, turn around and do the shooting thing on riding your stick all the way down to the end. That's still, I would say, the greatest celly of all time in professional hockey. Did you plan that one or did you just improvise?
Well, when I scored that game in the third period, which ended up, and we ended up winning that game, the first game back in Toronto, it just happened. When I sat on my stick going towards my goalie, it just happened. I never thought about it. I never ever did it before anywhere. It just the way it's supposed to be in pro sports. Things is just supposed to happen spontaneously are supposed to happen. And a lot of people to this day talk about how many times I rode my stick in the National Hockey League. And the answer is once. That was the only time.
Yeah.
And the reason why people get a little confused is different players did it after I did it, but they remember the first time. But I only did it the once, and it was like, kind of like I'm back and I'll see you the next game sort of thing. But I did. It was good for our team and our organization, and when you win, you should be very happy. And we were very happy that we got 2 points on the road, especially the first time back in Toronto.
Now, Squid, did you hear about it in the dressing room or see it on TV? Like, what was your reaction when you saw that, or did you even bother?
Oh, I saw it on replays afterwards, and I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was, pretty cool.
That was awesome.
Well, Mike, I did it after I scored. I never did it after the star selection.
Oh, I thought you did it after the start selection. I know you did. I thought you did it.
No, it was after we scored.
Oh, you scored the goal.
Every guy on the bench on the ice seen it. No, I never did it after.
No, it was after he scored a goal, and you know what? I didn't have a problem with it.
It was 5 minutes to go in the game.
That's what it was. It was near the end.
Yeah.
Well, you end up in Vancouver. Roger Nielsen, the old familiar face we talked about in the game. Talk about that run the team went on right to the Stanley Cup final with the white towel and the whole shebang.
Well,
that was the following year, wasn't it, Tiger?
The following year?
Yeah, that was 82.
Wasn't that the following year?
Yeah,
that was 82,
or 2 years.
The white towel thing is interesting due to the fact that every fan in Vancouver, they created this white towel thing that happened at the baseball game the other night between Atlanta and the Dodgers. Was the Atlanta people had red flags or red towels, whatever you want to call them. So the people of Vancouver own that, right? They're the ones that developed it, and good for them, because that was another spontaneous thing that started. But the reason we went to the finals that year was only for one reason. We had a really good coach, and we had a really good character team. Our talent base was not all that great, but if you look around, if you go through that whole team of the guys that played, I think 16 of those people remained in the game, working in the NHL or in junior hockey, but mostly in the NHL, whether they were coaches, GMs. Jimmy Nails, the GM in Dallas, he was on that team. Ronnie Delorme scouted after that for 30-some years for the Canucks. Thomas Gradine scouted. I mean, Stan Schmiel. I mean, Kurt Fraser coached in Atlanta for the Thrashers when they were called the Thrashers. I mean, most of those fellas stayed in the game. There's only a very select few of us that didn't. Because I'm one of the only guys I don't think that ever worked for a team ever. And it just showed you the character and the guys, the love for the game that team had. The other thing that we had that nobody ever talks about, but we had probably the two best trainers in the league. Our medical trainer was phenomenal. So,
that was Larry Ashley, right?
Yeah, Larry Ashley. He was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Kenny Flager was our equipment guy, and everything was always done perfectly. Larry would, he would work on the guy's legs, arms, whatever, and get them ready to play. And I really believe that had a lot to do with it. We didn't. A lot of guys. We hardly missed a game in the playoffs. The main core group, which was all about, and Harry Neal and Roger ran a good show. I loved playing for Harry Neal when he coached me, and he was a GM, because he was a funny guy. And the other thing about Harry Neal was interesting was Harry Neal, you could go a month and never see the same practice. That's a guy that's got brains. These other fellas can have a practice, and you'll see it over and over and over again, because they're not thinking about changing their practices, So to me, that's a sign of a good coach is a guy that has different practices and practices that are there for development of the game, whether it's power play, penalty killing, forecheck, whatever it is, right? And Harry always had practice. Roger always obviously did too. And they were a good tandem. Harry and Roger were a good group to work for. They were good people. It's funny when you're good people and your teammates respect management, how much more you get out of each other. And we did that with that group, and we were close. I mean, the Islanders, if you remember that, in '79, Lanny scored the overtime goal in the 7th game, and it upset the Islanders so bad that we caught them 4 years later on their 4th cup. And we would have won that first game in the Island. We lost in double overtime. Who knows where that series would have went? But it was fun. It was a tough series. Getting rid of even LA, getting rid of Chicago. Those were friggin' battles, That was when hockey was knock 'em down, rock 'em, sock 'em. It was good. But the Islanders had a hell of a team. And if I'm going to lose to somebody in the finals, I'd rather lose to my buddy Trottier than anybody else.
Now, how did it all come to an end in Vancouver for you?
What happens is that sometimes in a dressing room, the management think you're bigger than they are, and you have to go. And that's what happened in Vancouver. I was getting towards the end of my contract, and I had a lot of, the guys would listen to me no matter what. And sometimes management and ownership, they don't like that. And the other thing that really, I think, upset the ownership group was I bought a house in West Vancouver in the British properties, the who's who of the zoo live. And I don't think the ownership group appreciated me buying $1 million house. And I think that ticked them off. But anyway, when you look back at it, getting traded is a good thing, because again, it's just the way the sports world works. Is every time I got traded, I got more money.
Well, let me stop you right there. There's where I want to go with. There's where I want to go with this. Now, you told us a story one time, and let's see if I get this story right. You asked for your pay, about your pay, because you're moving to the States, so it's a different currency. And they said something to the effect, well, we'll prorate on conversion. And you said, no, it's not going to work like that. I'm making $1 Canadian. I want $1 US. And besides you're moving my family, I want a new contract, or I ain't going anywhere. Is that kind of how it all went?
Yeah, basically. I mean, again, a lot of players, first of all, I never had an agent. My first contract in Toronto, Herb Pinder from Saskatoon helped me out with that contract. And he did help me out a little bit in Vancouver, but I never really had an agent, like a full-time guy, right? To me, I used to hire the odd labor negotiator who was at the top of his game to help me out and give me some advice and look at some of the contracts, because who knows if they change the wording, if they don't think you got a guy looking after the farm. So I always had Deloitte were my accountants for 47 years. So I always had good people. McCarthy Tetrell in Toronto were my law firm. And I always had really good people look after things for me. But the other thing is you got to fight for what you believe in, and you got to tell the ownership group or that GM in most cases what your stance is. I mean, it's called negotiating, not here it is, sign here. That don't work for me.
Well, I think that set a precedent.
I get paid very well as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think that set a precedent, Tiger, for players, because if I'm not mistaken, I mean, until all players were paid in US dollars, it was the two different currencies. So that was a bit of a precursor to all of that. Like you demanding to be paid equally.
Well, I mean, because that only makes sense. Because anywhere, and if you're working for IBM or you're working for CN Railroad and you're working in the States, you get paid in US dollars. I mean, come on. This is the way the world works, guys. But again, some players get intimidated when you're in that friggin' office by yourself, and there's probably 2 or 3 of them in there, and you're in there by themselves. That's when you got to get aggressive. What's the worst case scenario? They say no. Oh, by the way, we're not signing, and we're going to trade you again. You're in the best position. They're not.
Well, now maybe pick up on it.
They just traded a couple guys for you again. And if you don't sign, what are they going to do? Where are they going to send you? So, and by the way, get off your wallet. I mean, Squid, you were lucky enough, but a whole bunch of other guys and all the guys that participated in the lockout. And when the NHL finally got full disclosure, then the guys got what they deserved. unfortunately, a bunch of the other guys and didn't fight enough. Whether you can blame it on Gordie Howe or whoever you want to blame it on, the guys were always underpaid as a professional group of athletes compared to the other professional leagues because they did not stand together.
Well, I was going to ask you, Tyler.
That didn't start till about 94, in that range. I think when Daig went to Ottawa and he signed into that $12 million contract over 4 years or something. That's when things started to shift, and it was after the lockout in 90. When was the lockout? 92 or 93?
4.
Was it 94? Yeah, I was done by then. I was coaching. But once that happened, then all of a sudden you had salary disclosure. You had free agency back when in our day. Tiger was 32 years old. A lot of guys were done by then, and you didn't get an opportunity to be a free agent. Then all of a sudden it gets lowered to 28 and then 26. And, now, a kid comes in at 18 years old, 8 years in the league, he can be an unrestricted free agent.
Well, now, Tiger, I wanted to get you to tell us about, now in Hartford, things didn't go as well. Now, you have a funny story, although at the time it probably wasn't funny, about leaving the rink the night you left Hartford and then meeting some unruly characters and then collecting your last paycheck, which was a little bit of a different story. Well,
yeah, Hartford didn't go very good in the fact that it was a poor organization from the ground up, poor coaching, poor general manager, ownership group didn't know what they were doing, zero leadership in the upper class of the organization. They were all those guys. The game had passed them by, and the ownership group wasn't smart enough to realize that. Mm-hmm. And the sad part was they had incredible, great young players. If they would have had a reasonable coach and GM, they were the top 4 team in the last 4 standing in the playoffs because they had Dave Babbage, they had Ronnie Francis, Kevin Denis, Sylvain Turgeron, Paul Lawless, Mike Liuet was a goalie, Stevie Weeks was a backup goalie. They had Dana Merson was a young man then. They had an incredible team, but their practices were the worst I'd ever seen in my entire life, and they had no leadership there. Even in the room, they had no. Joe Quenneville was there. Everybody was scared to be a leader because Emil Francis was a dictator, and they were scared of that, having leadership. But that was unfortunate, and that's the way, it's funny about pro sports. These guys come along with a few $1 billion, and they want to buy a team, but they're not smart enough to put the right management group together, I'd like to interview the next guy, whoever, like even the Kraken guy. I don't know who he is, but in Seattle, hopefully he's a smart man and lets the hockey people run the hockey team. And the other thing in Hartford, the owner's son was our stick boy, so he was always squealing on whatever happened. I mean, that's just you just don't run a business like that. Yeah. These are multi-billion-dollar businesses, It's just pure stupidity. But anyway, I got kicked out of the rink. They traded me, and then at the airport in front of my family, my family was going back to see my dad died of cancer, and so as we sat around waiting for the plane, then they come when I went to get on the plane. They said, "Oh, by the way, we forgot we traded you. We released you this morning." So I went home, and then the guys were playing in Montreal, and then the next game, a couple of days later on a Friday night, they were playing back in Hartford, and I went to the game like usual. And I lived close to Gordie House, so I used to pick up Gordie a lot on the way to the rink because Gordie lived across the cornfield from me. And so I never sat out a game there. Well, I got hurt for a while, and so of course I always sat with Gordy. Anytime I could be with Gordy, I sat with Gordy. But when I was sitting in the Gordy, this cop come up to me and tapped me on the shoulder, and he goes, "Are you Tiger Williams?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "I'm here to escort you out of the building." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, you're not big enough." And I stood up and I give him a bit of a shove, which apparently is not good. And he says, "Come on, let's go." And I said, "No." I said, "You better go get some help. I'm not going nowhere." And so he took off. Gordy's hugging me. I sit down again. Gordy hugs me. And I think, well, he's probably going to come back here. So I take my tie off because this could be a bit of a rodeo coming up here. And I took my tie off and put that away because you don't want a guy grabbing and choking you to death. And Gordy says to me, "Tiger, you don't need this in your life, and I don't need this in your life. And I'll come and see you after the game and blah 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 blah." And I says, "No, Gordy." I says, "I fought my way in this league. I'm willing to fight my way out of it. That's not a problem." And so they come back, and this time there was 4 of them, and they kept their distance. They were a couple arm lengths away on both sides of me, and they pulled out their guns and they just went, "Turn around. We're handcuffing you. We're taking you out of the building." And I said, "I ain't turning around. I said, "Which one of you guys is coming first?" I said, "Which one of you chicken shits is coming first?" And that guy goes, they're pointing their guns at me, and Gordy says, "They'll shoot you." I said, "They don't have the balls to shoot me." And anyway, they piled on me and they took me down to my car and they give me a thing that I was never allowed back in the building the rest of my life, or I'd go to jail or some bullshit. Anyway, so that was the last time I was ever in that. Well, it was the second last time I was ever in that building.
Yeah.
Then about 2-3 weeks later, I went down there. I was hanging around with a group of guys, Harley guys, and they were a well-known group of Harley people that a lot of people don't like, but they're in that 1% group. Smart guys can figure out who they were.
Yep.
And I had a relationship with those guys throughout from my days in Toronto to Vancouver, everywhere, because they're all across the country. And for some reason, we'd always spend a little bit of time with each other when nobody was looking. And so they were at the bar that I went to watch the hockey game. And I never met these fellas before, and I met them. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I hadn't got a paycheck. And so we jumped on our Harleys, and we drove down to the Hartford Civic Center to go get my paycheck. And they walked in first, and we caused quite a commotion in there, and the players were nervous as hell because I picked the time right just before they were going on the ice. And then I called Brenda and I said, "Okay, so if there's somebody comes at the door, and gives you an envelope, open it up, call me and tell me what's in there." Well, it was my paycheck. So they were never late after that. So me and my biker buddies, and we were very good at collecting paychecks for guys that the team didn't want to pay. But anyway, Hartford's a great place to play as far as the fans, the building, the location. Good place to live. Great schooling, which is important for my 2 kids. So I liked it there, but the organization was, if the fans would have ever realized how bad they were, it was sad. It was sad for all those young guys, and a lot of guys they were scared to open their mouth because they knew Amo Francis would run them out of the league. Well, I wasn't. At my age, it didn't matter, and I still had 4 years left of my contract. So what are you going to do to me?
Now, Tiger, over the years, you've been known for some great quotes. You've kind of addressed this one already, but when you can deal with fear, then you'll probably make something of yourself. You've got to be scared every day that you're going to lose, and scared that every day someone is going to take your job. I was scared every second I played. That's what it's all about. And that, I think, define your career. That's the way you took life every day, approaching your game.
Well, I think you have to approach that way, and especially for a lot of fans don't realize when you're playing pro, you got to make it happen, every day. So playing scared is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Because if you're too comfortable, you ain't going to be very good. That's just the way it's got to be. I mean, this is a very select group of people. And we'll just talk about the hockey world. The guys that are playing the National Hockey League today is a very, very special select group of people that have something either between the ears or they're born with some talent, but you got to make it happen. And you got to perform. And it's a rare thing. And if you're lucky enough to win the cup, and I don't care if you play 100 shifts or one shift, that's a hard trophy to win. Yeah. It might be the hardest trophy in pro sports to win. It's a gruel during those playoffs. It's a grind during the season, and it's a wonderful place to be. And the other thing that we don't talk enough about is you'll never get a better group of people than the hockey people. I would imagine Squid and I together, we might be able to, and the different teams we played on and the different guys we met, whether it was junior or after now in post your career, is you wouldn't, for me, I'm playing on 5 teams and playing in the league for 15 years, you can't count 5 guys that you'd want to hit over the head, They're a pretty phenomenal group of people in the National Hockey League, and good for them, and I think that goes all the way back. Who contribute to this group of good people are not just the coaches; these are your billets. All of us, most of us had billets, and for me, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys without my billets in Swift Current, Millie and Gord, Olsen. Then the coaches, the trainers, they all help in mentoring you as you go on, even as a pro. And if you're with good organizations and have good people and your teammates it's a phenomenal group of people. And that's why we're still together. Like Dave Schultz, the Hammer, I love being with him now. He's got the best hairdo in the National Hockey League for a guy who's 7 years old. But, I battled with him. I, thought about killing him more than once. And now I can't wait to see him again. He's just a great guy. When the game's over, it's over, man. We're just the same again. So it's a and I'm a big fan of Bettman. I think he's done a phenomenal job. And I would like the fans to quit booing him. I don't think that's right. There's no need for it. And so you people out there, listen. I haven't got time to slap you all. But I like him. I think he's done a great job. Him and Daly, I think, have done a phenomenal job.
Squid?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that. And I love what you said before, though, about 5. Because I was asked one time in an interview, someone asked me, like, how many people did you hate that you played with, over your course of your career in 4 different teams? And I said, first of all, hate's a pretty strong word. I said, I don't think there was anybody that I actually hated that I played with. I said, there was probably 5 guys that I maybe didn't get along with, or we thought things differently. And I said, that was it, 5 guys. And I probably played with, 150 guys over the course of my career, maybe more. So I think the same way as you, and I do believe that Gary Bettman and Bill Daly have done a great job as well. I mean, they've made a lot of money for the players, and they've made a lot of money for the owners. So they've done a phenomenal job growing the game and bringing the revenues up to where they should be compared to the other sports. Well, they're not that close to them yet, but they've done a hell of a job increasing them. Well,
there probably wouldn't be an NHL today if Bettman hadn't stepped in and put things in place as he did, because the league probably would have been bankrupt at some point. So they have done a job from that standpoint, put the league together, and they've made it put it in a position where people will enjoy the game. Tiger, we are getting down in the minutes here. We want to thank you so much for spending so much time with us. We're going to make this into a 2-parter, by the way, for listeners out there, but we're well on the verge of quotes. My humble opinion, the quote that put you on the list of the all-time greatest quotes ever elimination game going into the third period against Pittsburgh. I think it was Brian McFarland asked you if you guys could hang on or the Depends have a chance. And without missing a beat, your response was, them Penguins are done like dinner. Where did that one come from? I mean, that lives on in.
I don't know. I mean, when you went and did interviews with Brian and with Dick Bettles and those guys, I never ever thought of anything. I just waited for the question and responded the way that it just whatever way the noodle was thinking that day, you know. Like somebody said to me the other day, hey, about this podcast. And by the way, this is the second one I've ever did in my life. I did one because Daryl wanted me to go on one, but and I went on this one because of Squid. And some guy, well, why don't you ask them for their questions? And I said, that would be a chicken shit thing to do. You know, let them fire at you, you know, give them a response or, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've enjoyed it. I was quite nervous because I don't even like looking at a computer. I don't need a computer. I'm like that fellow that runs that $80 billion private equity firm out of New York. He doesn't even have a cell phone. But I'm glad I got through it.
Well, I'm going to ask you a couple of things. Now, you're a bit of a prankster, and some of the pranksters you came across throughout the years. Now, one story I heard about you.
I know your buddy Daryl was probably the worst, but he got away with it every goddamn time.
Well, there's a few
nobody could catch him.
Well, here's one, Squidford, that maybe you don't know this one about Tiger. More precious memories at the NHL players meeting. I think they're in the Bahamas or something, and there was the big formal dinner, and you were hiding behind a bush and pushed Wendy Sittler into the pool, her and another girl, when you're formally dressed going to the
No,
party.
I was actually at the Calgary Stampede.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we were at the Calgary Stampede together. The Montreal guys and us, the Canadian guys and us, we're playing a baseball game for charity during the Stampede. And Wendy got pushed in the, but everybody should know, I wasn't a very good skater, and I stumbled a couple times, and she just happened to be in the way, and she got pushed in. She's still mad. That's what I'll probably live to be 180, because she ain't gonna let me go up above her and sit beside her at the pearly gates. She doesn't want me up there.
Well, I was going to ask you, had a very strong bond with Daryl Sittler, maybe not the night of the pool incident, and Lanny McDonald. It's been over 40 years. I mean, you've touched on it briefly, but what cemented the relationship with these guys? You and Lanny are Western boys, so that might have helped, but you also were battled against each other once in the playoffs.
Well, Lanny and I did. Of course, Daryl and I, thank God, we never. It's just the way it is. I mean, Lanny's job was to score goals, and my job was to stop him from scoring goals. So you got to do what you got to do, because I got a different crest on me that I have to look after. I have to honor that crest. So I got to do what I got to do. And Lanny and Ardell, they were a little upset when I cut him for 9 stitches, but he also could have quit shooting the puck at my goalie too. He had that. He could have made that decision. He elected to keep doing it, so I had to do what I had to do. That's just the way the world works. But we've been good friends for 47 years, us two, and you throw in everybody else, but those two and Trotch and Dean Kennedy. There's probably about my group. There's probably about 50 of us that we hang together on it. We keep track of each other, and that's what we should do. It's nice to see what their grandchildren are doing now, never mind their own kids. But that's what the game's all about. It's about people, and I say this all the time. Good people have good results. Bad people don't have zero for results.
Squid, you got anything for Tiger before we let him go?
No, I think, the thing I love about hockey players, Tiger, guys like Daryl, Lanny, all these guys who I've all had the opportunity to play with or get to know, family. Family is so important, and you got to look after your family, and that's kind of the number one thing. And that's what I love about hockey players. They look after their family. when they're playing. They look after in the dressing room and on the ice. And then afterwards, when they go home, it's all about the family as well. And Tiger's one of those guys.
Well said, Squid. Good
Yeah.
for you. I second that motion.
Well, any final thoughts from
Yeah,
you, Tiger, before we let you go?
No, my final thought is thanks for having me on. Thanks for calling me, Squid. I appreciate the call. And Mike, the ultimate Leafs fan. I think there's a few other guys out there that might want to challenge that. We have a guy here in Swift Current that he's license plates Leafs. He's got his sign on. Everything's Leaf. So good for him. Larry Jensen's his name, and he's a huge Leaf fan. But they're all across the country.
They're
That's
everywhere.
the amazing thing.
Everywhere,
They're all across the country, and the Leafs fans are good people. That's the one thing when you get traded the first month or so, you miss those people. There's a lot of good people, but there's good. I found out there's even in LA, there's good people everywhere. In Detroit, I love Detroit too. So we just got to keep being. We got to get through this pandemic. We got to keep encouraging people to get vaccinated and move on, because you're going to have to get it sooner or later.
Yep.
And this stupidity of not getting vaccinated, I don't get it. But anyway, I'm encouraging everybody to get it vaccinated as soon as possible so we can get back to normal.
Well said. Well, Tiger.
That would be very nice.
Tiger, we can't thank you enough for joining us today. It was some great, fantastic stories. We knew you wouldn't disappoint, and it was a lot of fun. Thank you again for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Mike. Thanks, Squid.
Thanks, Tiger.
Be good,
Thanks,
you guys.
Tiger.